This is In the Black with T. Dallas Smith. Conversations with trailblazers, glass ceiling breakers, and champions for change who inspire and cultivate leaders every day.
I'm delighted to welcome Mitch Rudin, Chairman and CEO of Savills North America, to the podcast. Mitch has driven strategic growth and operational excellence at Savills, Mack-Cali Realty, Brookfield Office Properties, and CBRE. Mitch, welcome to In the Black.
Dallas, thank you. It's always an adventure.
I was thinking about a few years ago when we met for the first time. We end up on the stage together, so it can only go up from here.
Well, I think back, what you said, what thematically runs throughout your book is that you always have to see for yourself. And when we actually first met was on that Zoom call where we were contemplating an industry ERG, and you had to see for yourself who this guy was, and it started, we had that great meal which started this friendship.
Oh man. And so I would tell everybody who's listening to this, I have an elite group of guys that I call my Branch Rickeys, okay? And so if you don't know the story about Branch Rickey was the guy who decided to change baseball by bringing Jackie Robinson in the game. And if the rest of that story is the other 28 owners of the teams didn't like Branch for what he did. And so he was out here on the island by himself. He had crosses burned at his house. He was trying to be kicked out of his club, all of that. So it takes a lot, particularly for a white male who has a lot of things that you can do in this world or just continue to be great versus kind of looking back and trying to look and help and support people who don't look like you. And I'll say without a doubt, Mitch is one of those guys. So Mitch, I'm going to just go and start talking, asking you some questions. Number one, how did you get started in commercial real estate?
I actually started my career as a lawyer. And I was at a firm, venerable but small New York firm, now about 110 years old, named Davis and Gilbert. And their practice was that you rotated through different departments, and then there was a mutual selection as you approach your second year. And I really liked the real estate partner, Jerry Uram, who is a very good friend to this day. And I liked the practice. And it was nothing like all the obscure stuff that we did in law school, the transaction nature of it. Jerry and I worked together for another 6+ years. And the last year I practiced, I was the senior associate and he was the partner on what were the 3 largest lease transactions in Manhattan, each of which led to new construction. And on one of the deals, the folks on the other side approached Jerry and said, look, I guess they thought I handled myself reasonably well, and said, would you be adverse to us having a conversation with him? And Jerry, being the kind of person he was, says, I would never stand in your way. And after a lot of soul searching, because I was fulfilling a parental dream. I couldn't be my son the doctor, but at least I was my son the lawyer. And the hardest part of it was not where I was being approached by, which was Tishman Speyer, one of the great owner developers, really one of the great real estate citizens, and Jerry Speyer. But could my parents get comfortable with the thought, because they didn't know anything about real estate. Real estate to them was candidly the housewife who, when her kids went off to school, leased apartments or houses or sold them. I went and never looked back, and it's been a great career.
That's awesome. So, you've had obviously a very dynamic career. Savills now, but you were at CBRE at one time, Mack-Cali Realty at one time, Brookfield Office.
Can't hold a job down. I never thought. I always thought I'd retire at the first place, and now I just can't hold a job.
So, all that's being said, with over 30 years experience in commercial real estate, what prompted you to join Savills in 2019?
I went through a moment of reflection, and I really started to think about what I wanted to do, which was likely going to be the last material role, or hopefully the last material role in my career. And, I was approached by people on the ownership side, and I had a number of people who said, look, why don't we get behind you and we can raise $250 to $500 million to put a fund together. And I realized, one, I didn't bring anything particular expertise to that. But I also, as I reflected back on my career, what was most important to me was professional development and seeing, so many people succeed. And I thought back to when because I had left CBRE to go to the principal side at Brookfield. And I reflected on my departure memo, and I talked about the 23 people in the tri-state region who had become vice chairs. The person who succeeded me as CEO of the tri-state, who's still in that role now 12 years later. In an earlier generation, the person who succeeded me to run the business unit I was running there. And I sort of looked back on Brian. I saw the opportunity to do that one more time. And also, if there's been any constant, whether it's been on the principal or the service side of the industry, isn't it an organization that's ready to effectuate change, and let me be part of that. So when joining Savills, it was Savills Studley at the time. They had a UK headquartered company, 168 years old. We are in terms of global revenue, the 5th largest globally. But in the U.S., we're a fraction of the size of our competitors. I talked to the CEO, and he said, it's a moment in time to accelerate the integration and not to give up all of Studley, but to take the best of Studley and to take the best of Savills and really make it a unique and extraordinary organization. So I really came to grow leadership, build a succession plan, develop emerging leaders, and as I'm sure we'll get to ultimately at some point, advance their efforts in diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes. Well, I mean, to that point, it's actually, we talked about how we met, ultimately ended up being at a NAR conference on a panel for the first C5 event, which will be in Atlanta this year. But we had this question, I think, was asked to us: how do we get brokers started? How can we incentivize more people who look like me to get in the commercial real estate business? And Mitch made the comment about, paying salaries and making sure that we can help sustain some people from that financial standpoint. Lo and behold, from my perspective, I came out and said, absolutely not. That's, and everybody's kind of looking at me like, what? Like, it's almost like reverse. They thought, well, maybe I would have been saying what Mitch was saying and Mitch would have been saying what I was saying. But the reality is, I've been in the business now 41 years, and I've been on straight commission the whole time. And what I try to tell people, that is the industry. And my strongest brokers here at T. Dallas Smith & Company are the ones who, we're all straight commission, but the ones who came in and embraced that are just killing it now. But the ones who I took a couple of experiments, and I paid this person this a little bit and paid this person this a little bit, complete fails. And so I'm saying all that to say that there has to be a way that we transfer the real experience of commercial real estate, because my belief was simply that if you paying them, you're giving them a false sense of security. More than anything, allow that person to get inside of a deal, then I think we got a different narrative. So have you had time to think about our debate since that time? And are you willing to, on this podcast, say, Dallas, you were right?
I would tell you this. I have a number of colleagues who would like me to say, Dallas, you're right. Boy, I tell that story as well over and over again. And, you and I have a little roadshow planned over. We take the opposite positions of what people would expect. But I do believe the challenges are very different in larger organizations. As you recounted yourself, it's a small number of people, infinitesimal, may be limited to people named T. Dallas Smith, who have the resilience to do what you did, to encounter what you encountered, the resistance that you encountered, and to thrive. What I found more so is that we're just an unknown to people. And, look, there's a resistance element to it. I grew up in a solidly middle-class background, went to college, went to law school. My parents, and they had no idea what this is. So you take someone who comes from a very different background. most of the time we're talking, when we go to schools and things, we're talking to people who have no idea what this industry is or what it's like. And then you have the broader question, and what precipitated that call that we had was not so much a DEI effort, but an article in the Wall Street Journal that talked about, irrespective of background, that there were 700,000 sales jobs outstanding. And there's nothing really better than undertaking this. There is no career like commercial real estate that can pay you. Where do people make 7 figures, 8 figures? Don't believe they actually have a boss who can achieve this. It's an extraordinary career. But I do believe, for us, and not only professional, Black graduates of school, but, in terms of gender, sexual orientation, anyone who doesn't fit foursquare into, white male, we need to create a path. And some of it's to just induce them to explore it. I would say we've done our history, which was also my history at CBRE, was that before a similar program started, hiring the country club kid, whenever you want to say, attrition was 75, 80% within 2 years. And that was with no support other than that provided by the organization, the hunger, whatever it may be. We're running at about 60% in this program in terms of retention. So the retention rate has almost tripled. We've gotten some extraordinary people. Would they have found their way here anyway? I don't know. So I think, unfortunately for you, Dallas, we're going to continue. We are announcing our new class starts in September, and we will be recruiting for another one next year. Those are, 8 to 14, and, with a broad definition of what fits into diversity. And we're seeing some real stars come out of the program.
Well, so I would just call it a draw right now for the podcast. Yeah. And we're going to take.
By the way, I do like your method.
And our retention, and I think we're probably beating you on our retention rate too.
Yeah, you probably are. Well, you have that test we can't ask. Like, I love that. Well, what kind of car do you drive, Dallas? that test. We don't have that test.
I'll have to explain that to the audience one day. But one thing about this career, I agree 100%. I tell people all the time, what other business can you be in? Can you be broke on a Friday and rich on a Monday? But commercial real estate. One of my favorite movies is the movie 42 that talks about Jackie Robinson and Branch Rickey. I've talked about it. There's a line in there, and I'm going to ask you the question that Jackie asked Branch. And so they had played a game, and this guy came in high and spiked his back of his calf, and he's getting stitched up on. Remember the scene? He's getting stitched up. These writers are asking, "Are you saying the guy's a liar?" He's like, "Why don't you ask him?" By that time, Branch comes in and says, "Hey, get out. Let me talk to my guy." And Jackie's laying on the table. He's been sawn up, and he just says, "Branch, why are you doing this?" And he says, "Well, we had a victory over fascism. It's time we have a victory in baseball." He says, No. But why are you doing this? And he answers the question about he was on a team and he was a player coach. They had a black player who was really good, but he saw the guy lay low because of the color of his skin. And he said, "Jackie, you made me love baseball again." So I'm asking you the question that Jackie asked Branch. Mitch, why are you doing this? Why is this important to you in terms of diversity in this business?
I've been asked that before. The first couple of times I stumbled over it, but it did cause me to reflect a bit, because you do know it's been quite a long history. Some of it started with my family. I had parents who always wanted us to do the right thing. I never even reflected on it, but when I used to visit my father in his office, his protege was black. That was in the 50s. How unusual that was.
Oh, yeah.
We never thought twice about it. He used to, drop lines. He had, sounds like more than what it is, but he had a couple of hosiery factories in North Carolina, and he stared down the Klan when he integrated them. And then I was always in circumstances. I was in an integrated school, played sports, and together, and then it became very much because I could. When I think about it, talked to my brother about something, and he says, "You remember you used to when you were playing in the Lawyers League, and this was, 70s, 80s, and, it'd be 10 o'clock at night, and you were the one that had to go out and flag the cab down?
Yeah.
I said, yeah, I kind of forgot about that. But, we didn't think about it.
Yeah.
And if there were 9 of us going up to play basketball in a school in the Bronx, it wasn't just the white guys who were looking for the guardian angels.
Right.
We were concerned that something would happen, even though we had a bunch of big guys.
Yeah.
So it was always because of it. And then when I entered as we moved into the industry, and it really, it was secondary as it related to race, but first started with women. And I was of a generation where when I got into the workforce, it was alien to me because my experience all through school, including college and law school, is that we were the same. And we had the same aspirations, and we went through college and applied to the same graduate schools, and that we got the same jobs and, enter into the reality of the workforce and find that, things change. And then it sort of expanded as, I saw, as we moved into dealing with issues of race, which was really the second. And the story was, I was at a company called Insignia, started in the commercial industry by acquiring the Edward S. Gordon Company, where I had come from, and with the goal of becoming the largest global real estate service firm. We got to 4th when we were acquired by CB. Walking around the office, I see a fellow I know from the industry, but no better through his brother from having played basketball. We're sitting down chatting, and has a picture with 2 pages of black photos on it. I said, well, what's that? He says, well, I'm thinking about starting what was then called an affinity group. And I said, you got an executive sponsor? He says, no. I said, you do now. That was Eric Yarborough, who unfortunately, tragically, but Eric and I co-founded what was the first African-American affinity group in the industry, called ANG, when they were called affinity groups.
Yes.
We built it successfully. They were nice enough after I left to name an award after me and to make me the first beneficiary of the Mitch Rudin Diversity Award. And I've stayed in touch with a number of people through that. And we sort of built it from there. I'm very glad. I know you're friends with Kevin Dudley at CBRE. And
That's how we met. We met
through Kevin. Kevin co-runs ANG now for the greater tri-state region. Has been a great success. And now as we've built on it, and then really, has expanded more now into the LGBTQ plus community, and we'll see wherever else we go. But it's something that's always been easy for me. I know that makes it somewhat unique. There are things you can talk about to do, but I think probably the greatest appreciation is that it's easy for me. It's something I don't have to think about. It's natural, and I think, as you found out, it's sincere. And I having had the history of it, not having woken up, like a lot of people did post George Floyd, and now unfortunately forgetting about it.
It's unfortunate, but I my contention is it's going to be the Branch Rickeys of the world that's going to make the difference. And I so appreciate you being one of them, my friend. But I want to talk about a little bit. You talked about basketball like sort of a past tense. You still play basketball on a regular basis.
I still play.
Motivation for all of us couch potatoes at home.
Someone said it's the advantage of longevity. I didn't have my own book, I have my own podcast, but I did have an article in the Wall Street Journal, and it talked about not so much a bunch of older guys playing ball, but the sense of community that's been created, the career advice, and having sons who are 38 and 36, as they were in college entering a workforce, we'd play, we'd sit down, particularly my younger son who played basketball his entire life in the area, kids from, disparate backgrounds, and they'd sit down with some of my professional friends, and they'd sit down, they'd see, a 35-year-old black investment banker. They'd see a 40-year-old black lawyer. It's one thing to see me, but also to bring those people together and provide inspiration and show a path. For me now, still playing, and we play It's unbelievable. There must be, in our general area, there's approximately 8 games a week involving 80-odd people. I play in the slightly older game, but once a month play with the slightly younger game. It's always the same. It's 4-on-4, 5-on-5, full court. The courts are between 65 and 75 feet, so just short of a full court. But extraordinary sense of camaraderie, great during COVID and rebuilding a sense of community. And, Kevin's, which was a great story. I thought who better to do an interview. He talked about the house rule was, including which extended to my son, which knowing me, I would apply the same rules to everybody, is that you could play once you made your high school JV. Kevin and his twin Kyle and our son Ben were 3-year starters for the Scarsdale varsity, and Kyle and Ben went off and played at Middlebury together. But he shows up and he plays with a up-and-coming broker at CB. 7 years later, we get him a job there. Now this broker has now firmly established himself, which certainly didn't hurt, knowing one of the real stars of the CBRE tri-state. And as Kevin told me 2 months ago, he got to pay it back because he did a deal with that broker's son. That's the kind of stories that we look for. And, the career advice. And, one of the things I learned, borrowed from the journal, is the concept of a personal board of directors. I couldn't be more proud. I tell people all the time, you refer to me as Branch Rickey, but in a broader sense, your Branch Rickeys are your personal board of directors. And for me and for others, it's really helpful to have people outside your firm, outside, and it may be clergy, it may be a competitor. My personal board were 2 bankers and a partner at a law firm. And they're very helpful to your career because they've had experiences in other organizations, that they can either help guide you or tell you when you're moving in the wrong direction. Or in many cases, when you're experiencing great frustration, they'll tell you, look, I experienced that 3 or 4 times. If it's not organization A, you'll see another flavor of it in organization B. And I encourage people to do that. And it helps with perspective. And last night in preparation, because I still believe in preparing, I listened to that wonderful interview, 2-part interview you did with Andy Gertner, who really is legendary as a professional, but legendary for being a gentleman. The kinds of lessons that people learn from him and others I've had the good fortune in the industry of. Staying with that firm, I was waiting to see who he said he called down. I was thinking it might have even been Steve Siegel, who it's been a great role model for me and a close personal friend, but it was John Dowling.
Yeah, well, the John Dowling. And I think that brings us to the perfect spot to stop. But coming up in the second part of my talk with Mitch Rudin, the chairman and CEO of Savills North America, Mitch reminds us to ignore the generations and don't get caught up in generalization.
Our hardest workers now are some of those who have joined us in the last 3-4 years. And they work every bit as hard, if not harder, than any other generation.
This has been In the Black with T. Dallas Smith. To find out how you can change the dominant narrative in the commercial real estate industry and challenge the status quo to improve the lives of others, go to tdsintheblack.com. In the Black with T. Dallas Smith is a production of Forbes Books.